we're under the philosophy that all golf is golf. So if you play mini golf, that's golf. We want to move away from the stereotype that you need to be playing 18 holes of golf to be a golfer. So we need to find ways and keep finding ways to, have people come through the doors and really have a great customer experience in our sport. And where the work that we're doing with our workforce, which includes our volunteers, is that we want to make sure that we've got a workforce who can provide those fantastic and memorable customer experiences for people, regardless of what customer segment they're coming into. Because if we don't have a workforce that's engaged and that's organised and feels recognised, they're not going to give that great customer experience, most probably, to someone coming through. And we're not going to have more people playing more golf or more Australians playing more golf.
That was Claudia Marazita, Head of Workforce Engagement for Golf Australia. For what it's worth, I see the work Claudia is doing transforming and future-proofing the volunteer engagement for golf volunteers across Australia as one of the best and most innovative programs in the world. From humble and challenging beginnings, Claudia and her team have stuck the course and are reaping the benefits of the well-regarded and successful program that it is today. And the exciting part, they're just getting started. As a person, Claudia has a passion for fostering vibrant workplace cultures and enhancing workforce experiences. She brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise from HR to managing volunteers, and what I think you'll find interesting is how aligned Golf Australia are across their departments to ensure customer experience is at the heart of every interaction, especially for their frontline volunteers. We'll explore the unique challenges and opportunities within the world of golf, as well as Claudia's strategies for nurturing a highly engaged workforce. From tee to green, we'll uncover the secrets to building a winning team and driving performance excellence. Stay tuned to learn how you can push through challenges and elevate your own workforce to new heights. Claudia Marazita, Head of Workforce Engagement at Golf Australia. Welcome to the Engage Volunteer podcast. How are you?
I'm good. I'm pumped. This is the first time I've been on a podcast, and it's talking about something that I really love and something close to me as a person who's been around golf for a really long time and now had the opportunity to shape the way that we engage and work with our workforce, including our volunteers. So super excited, and thanks for having me.
No, I love it. It really is your two true loves, isn't it? Golf, as a player yourself, I know you're a very keen player and very talented player, but also in HR and workforce, you've really combined the two truly here, haven't you?
Yes, I'm very lucky to have fallen basically into a dream job. I've got almost 10 years of experience as an HR professional under my belt now, but I've been an avid golfer since 7. So if someone had ever told me that I would work in HR and workforce within the golf industry, I probably would have said, sign me up. And yeah, really, really grateful to have this opportunity.
Yeah, well, and I think if anyone at Golf Australia would see the program that it is now as well, they would say, sign me up 10 years ago to where it is now. Only you and Damien and the team pushing it through. So we're really keen to, in the podcast today, understand about golf's journey, about engaging volunteers and workforce around the country. But you just touched on it there around dream job. When you said that, I recognized so many people on the podcast talk about this being a dream job. Like, it's so often a passion that drives people into these positions. So for you, let's start from the start. I know for you, your journey started in the charitable space, actually, around volunteering yourself and helping volunteers. Let's talk about your journey to get to where you are now. Do you want to start us at, was it Stroke Foundation?
Stroke Foundation. So as a ripe 19-year-old, funnily enough, my first experience in the HR world was actually as a volunteer. So I was an HR assistant for the Stroke Foundation. I did 1 day a week. And it's quite funny because I literally started off punching physical volunteer forms into a database, making up welcome packs, cold calling Rotaries and community clubs to try and get more volunteers. And 12 months later, I was interviewing prospective volunteers. So it's really, really great to almost have come full circle, having the opportunity to transform and shape the way that we engage with our volunteers within golf, but me starting my HR career as a volunteer myself. So I was fortunate to have worked at a number of different not-for-profits where we've had volunteers, but predominantly I have been an HR generalist. I've got in recent times quite an industrial HR background, worked through the pandemic at the Royal Melbourne Hospital as a HR business partner, and then fell into this job. So it's been a great change for me to have the opportunity to, as I said, transform the way that we look at how we can create a environment where golf is a place of choice for people who want to work and volunteer.
Yep. And we have a broad audience of people listening to the podcast, and quite a few in the HR space, and then obviously a lot in the volunteering space. Given your experience on playing both sides in this sense, do you see a distinct difference in the way that HR teams operate compared to volunteer teams? What's your thoughts there?
That's a really good question. I think there are differences, and I think there needs to be differences in a sense of when you're engaging and managing paid staff, you've obviously got to think about things sometimes a little bit differently. And when you've got volunteers, you do need to acknowledge that people are giving up their time. So sometimes you end up having more in-depth conversations and, running different types of functions and engaging with them a little bit differently. But fundamentally, HR principles, I would say, are quite similar across both. It's just the activities that you undertake which differentiate a little bit. And that's what we've done at Golf Australia in terms of creating a industry strategy for our workforce. And we've been able to utilise that overall strategy, which underpins a volunteering strategy straight out of with the same principles, just tailored to our volunteers.
Yeah, awesome. And now the role that you're in now with golf, I know you're working with Damien DeBowen and the team, and you've got a few other colleagues in the space. It's a transformational process you guys are going in right now with golf about engaging volunteers. Golf is a place for everybody. If you've played mini golf, then you're a golfer. All these things are drummed into my head from all of the catch-ups we've had about the process, which is amazing. Do you want to just summarize like the journey that golf is going on in your own words?
Yes, definitely. So we speak about it a lot, and golf is big. It's really big as a sport. People don't realize how many people play golf. There's over 3 million people play golf every year, and it's just getting bigger. Not even post pandemic, there was actually an increase in participation just before the pandemic, and that's almost tipped it over the line now. So we're actually in Australia seeing similar trends to what's happened previously in the US. We always follow the US in terms of participation trends in golf. And we're actually finding now that there are more people playing off-course golf than on-course golf. So off-course golf being mini golf, simulator golf, driving range golf, and then your on-course golf are your green grass, traditional type golf landscapes. And even if we look at our customer journey, the majority of off-course golfers almost skew female and younger. So we're trying to find ways in which we can tap into those customers and those participants and bring them along the journey to joining our member clubs and playing more green grass golf going forward. But it's definitely changed a lot since I started playing golf, which was over 20 years ago. We're doing a lot more work around women and girls engagement. We've got an Australian Open where it's a men's, women's and all abilities format, which is one of the first in the world to do so. So we are really changing the way that we think about our sport, because we joke that golf's everyone's second favourite sport. So how can we make it everyone's favourite sport, everyone's predominant sport? We, in our 3 Ps as part of our strategy, we want golf to be, it's a sport for life, and we want people to have fun. And like you said, Shannon, we're under the philosophy that all golf is golf. So if you play mini golf, that's golf. We want to move away from the stereotype that you need to be playing 18 holes of golf to be a golfer. So we need to find ways and keep finding ways to, have people come through the doors and really have a great customer experience in our sport. And where the work that we're doing with our workforce, which includes our volunteers, is that we want to make sure that we've got a workforce who can provide those fantastic and memorable customer experiences for people, regardless of what customer segment they're coming into. Because if we don't have a workforce that's engaged and that's organised and feels recognised, they're not going to give that great customer experience, most probably, to someone coming through. And we're not going to have more people playing more golf or more Australians playing more golf. as an overarching, purpose is that we want more Australians playing more golf. We don't want the same Australians playing more golf. We want more Australians playing more golf. And the workforce has got a massive part in that. And also, if we see participation rates increase the way they are, our game's only going to get bigger, and we need to put the correct mechanisms in place and have a vision to have a workforce which can keep up with that rate as well.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for the summary. And your title workforce is obviously volunteers is the largest pool of workforce, right? But there's also other facets of workforce. Can you talk to me about what they look like?
I can. So we break down. So in terms of the workforce that I am focusing most of my work on, obviously you can only do so much. Is the workforce that includes anyone who provides a direct customer experience at an event, club, facility, or place to play. So as you mentioned, we've got a paid workforce and we've got a volunteer workforce. Our paid workforce, we believe, is at least 30,000 people headcount across the country. We know that every year golf provides 27,800 full-time equivalent roles, and that includes everyone from our PGA professionals who are coaching, general managers of golf clubs, turf managers and superintendents, people working in hospitality, customer service. The list really goes on. So there's so much opportunity in the paid space. But when it comes to volunteers, we've probably got the same, or as you said, if not more, in the volunteering space. So we've got 1,603 different clubs, facilities and places to play across the country. We know that we have about 14,000 people every year who sit on just main boards of golf clubs. So they volunteer their time to manage strategy and governance for their clubs. We know that we've got almost 2,000 community instructors who work in regional areas where a PGA professional isn't present, or supports our PGA professionals with community coaching. But most importantly, and where I guess Rosterfy has allowed us to bring our volunteering program to life and hopefully extend that going forward, is our event-based volunteers that work across months of October to March every year. And through having a system in place, we've been able to identify that we have at least 1,500 people every summer volunteering at our key events. And we wouldn't be here without them, really.
Yeah, big time. And I know that you guys are looking at this journey of event volunteers. I've always seen it as like the fire starter, if you will. That's where you get the largest pool of volunteers for the Australian Open of golf, for example. And sometimes you'll have more applications than you'll actually have slots. I know that you guys are finding that balance at the moment, some high, some low for different events. Do you want to talk to us about that attraction piece and making sure that they are getting a good experience, volunteers, to then see in the future about how we can get them involved with these clubs and facilities as well? Because we look at major events like a Super Bowl that comes in 10,000 volunteers to a city and then leaves. A big thing we're really working on is how do we create a legacy from that major event? Was often more sporadic around the country in different locations, not just the biggest events, right, but different tournaments that you have. Talk to us about that idea of trying to bring those volunteers to clubland and facilities as well.
Definitely. So in less than 18 months, we now have information about 4,000 different volunteers across the country in Rosterfy. And the biggest, I guess, piece of value that we see at this particular point in time is actually understanding where they're located. So we now know how many volunteers we've got in Victoria, who are based in Victoria, how many are based in Queensland, how many are based in South Australia. We have the ability to create these pools of volunteers from our flagship events. But if we have a junior event which is coming up in South Australia in 2 or 3 months and we need volunteers, we can pull directly from those individuals, put a call out and say, hey guys, we've got this junior event that's going on. Does anyone want to assist or give up their time? And we do know, and I'm sure you know this, Shannon, and the statistics show that once someone's a volunteer, they're most likely going to volunteer again if they have a great experience. We have what we call serial volunteers in golf. There's a gentleman who's based in Howlong in New South Wales who he shows up at every single golf event every summer. And he's been doing it, jumps in his caravan, travels around, loves volunteering, and he loves major events. But I'm sure he's an individual who would definitely put his hand up to help at a tournament or go and help at a golf club that he might not be a member of. So For us, it's just actually being able to understand where everyone's located and then see what the needs of our clubs and facilities are or other local based tournaments are, so we can utilize that pool that we already have.
Yeah, understood. And just building on that each time, and I presume each year, well, we've seen it with other customers, but each year it becomes easier when you're then just going straight back out to a pool of people that are already engaged to say, would you like to do the same thing last time? And to some organizations, I was with one this morning, that every 12 months, because they don't have systems and processes in place, they actually refresh their entire database every 12 months because, well, we don't have the processes or systems in place. It's just easier to just re-invite them all to re-register every year. And I mean, this is a big organization I'm referring to. And I think for you guys, you're on that journey now, aren't you, of having that central place for volunteers to come?
Yes. And a great example of that, which really shines light on how we've had value around knowing exactly where our volunteers are based and where they've volunteered before, where other customers and other clients might be able to draw on this, is there was an event held in Alexandria in Victoria in early December last year. It's called the Cathedral Invitational. It was an event that we were supporting with production, but it wasn't our event. They were running as part of the schedule. They heard that we were using Rosterfy to register volunteers and to put calls out. So what we did was they needed 100 volunteers. They already had 25 volunteers, so we needed to find 75 for them. They said, look, we'd love to be involved and hopefully use your platform to gain more volunteers for our tournament. What we did was we directly targeted volunteers who were based in Victoria and had previously volunteered at either the 2023 Victorian Open or the 2022 Australian Open, which were both based in Victoria. And we went out to all of those volunteers with a call out, and we also published it just on Rosterfy as well. Within 2 days, we were able to find them 75 volunteers, and I think 58 of the 75 had volunteered at either the Australian Open or the Vic Open previously. So we actually had to close applications because we hit the number so quickly and they genuinely couldn't believe it. This is an event, it's a smaller event. It's in regional Victoria, about 2.5, 3 hours out of Melbourne. And they were surprised how quickly we were able to source volunteers for them. So it's the same that's happened with us at other smaller tournaments, which we haven't run before. We're seeing the same trends, which is really, really great.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to that legacy point I was touching on there, is that you're getting that fire started, that building that large database of engaged people that love their experience of golf, that then go, hey, I had a great time out there. Maybe I could get involved and help at other tournaments that might be either closer to my home or, I'm interested in heading out there. I'm free this weekend. I can do it. But because they're already engaged with you with the profile, it makes it much easier for them. But then you touched on at the start about you wanting that experience for, I guess, customers of golf and players of golf, that when they turn up, the workforce is representing golf to the best that they possibly can, right? There's only benefits of getting these return volunteers that have been there before. They've done their training. They've done inductions around how to present themselves and perform. Do you want to talk to that around that sort of retention plan and the benefits of having people that keep coming back?
Yes. So definitely we have, again, I've mentioned we've got seasoned volunteers in golf. And there's people who've been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years. And they're pivotal in a sense of they've got the knowledge, they understand how our tournaments and events work, and it's great to have them on board. Where we're starting to see we need to start to, I guess, shift our attention to is on our new pool of volunteers. Who are future volunteers going to be? But how can we bring both of those groups together to have our long-standing seasoned volunteers actually support our new volunteers? So we're finding since we've implemented Rosterfy, we've been able to access a whole new pool of volunteers, especially in the student landscape as well. And some of those students may not have ever come across golf before. We actually had a student from Deakin University who caddied at the Asia Pacific Amateur last year who'd never stepped foot on a golf course before. And he loves sport, loves the entertainment industry, wanted to help out. And it's about the connection point of putting him in touch with our seasoned volunteers who can provide that support and, I guess, comfort around volunteering in a new event. So it's how we connect those two together, which I think is key for us going forward, and especially engaging new volunteers from all walks of life, all different areas of the community. I think that's where we can see golf becoming really, really great. But it's, again, acknowledging that we do have long-standing volunteers and we want to continue supporting them. But how do we bring the two together?
Yeah, understood. And that's that relationship you have with Deacon. Is that something you're looking to do more of, about bringing in, younger demographics of volunteers into golf that perhaps haven't experienced golf themselves before? What are your thoughts on that demographic coming in?
Definitely. So it's something that we're looking to continue to do. We have a very good relationship with Deakin in terms of we have an internship program for sport management students who can do their working placement at the Australian Golf Centre across the PGA and Golf Australia. We're looking to expand that out to other universities and other institutions in the coming months and year as well, and starting to contact other universities to see whether they would want to promote some of our opportunities to their students, because we do know that volunteers, especially in sport, there's often the perception that a lot are older, but there's a lot of people out there who really want to give up their time because they just love being around sport. They love volunteering. They're really passionate about it, but it's about providing them with an opportunity to welcome them and let them in. And, pillar 2 of our Australian golf strategy is to attract new fans. So we want to bring new people in. And when we look at the workforce strategy and volunteer strategy, we want to attract and retain people that actually reflect the community. So there's a preconceived idea, and it obviously does still exist to an extent, that, golf is male, pale and stale. And I laugh because when I started playing golf myself, I was a young female, started at 7 years old, with a bunch of old white males. And as a sport, that's changing in terms of participation, but we need to make sure that we are providing workforce and volunteering opportunities for people from all different genders and backgrounds as well, because if golf doesn't reflect the community in a sense of workforce, people are probably not going to be as welcomed or feel as welcome when they do walk in the door. So having the ability to publish all of our opportunities in the one place, especially if we're looking at attracting a younger demographic who are tech savvy, and obviously they're used to using technology and they're also open to finding new opportunities and experiences, it really hones into that and actually shows that we can have opportunities for people who really just want to give up their time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's part of that journey you're going on. You have those seasoned volunteers that have ultimately in the past, for a long time before, never had systems or anything like this. There was a lot of phone calls, a lot of spreadsheets. I've seen it all with golf over the last, especially 5 years or so, in the transition to where you are now. I know you've recently just finished up the Vic Open and you did a lot of surveying. I know you spend a lot of time in working very closely with volunteers, going out with them and your team as well, getting feedback. How have you found that transition? And I guess in the thought of others, in particular, probably others in golf that might be a bit nervous about this transition of trying to centralize and streamline the way you're managing your volunteers.
Definitely. So it's been a journey, and it still is a journey, and we keep moving along the journey. And look, it's been a big change, especially for those long-standing volunteers where previously they've called someone or they've sent an email about volunteering or registered interest at their club, and they haven't had to go through a process of registering for an online platform and self-selecting shifts themselves. And it's been different for them. But funnily enough, especially I think around the support that we've been able to provide them and with the open communication that we've had with them, we've actually been able to give the majority a great experience. And that has shone through in the feedback that we've received. So for context, the 2024 Vic Open, which finished up end of January, start of February down in Victoria, we had 210 volunteers. The average age was 67 and about 90% were actually over the age of 50. So for the tournament season that we actually used Rosterfy, it was actually one of the events that was most skewed in terms of age with that older demographic. And it was actually the first event that we empowered volunteers to actually self-select their own shifts. So we had a volunteer coordinator who'd worked really closely to the Open for a number of years. She would review applications and pop people into groups based on their preferences and previous experience. We then emailed volunteers and said, here's a video on how to self-select your shift and apply for when you want to volunteer. And we actually had pretty good outcomes. We didn't have too many with concerns. In our post-event feedback, we had a response rate about 54-55% of those 210 volunteers, which was great. And we asked a question about general use of Rosterfy and whether they thought the user experience was easy and simple. And 80% of responses were strongly agree or agree in terms of that statement. And when it came to self-selection, 74% were strongly agree or agree. So in terms of the disagrees and the strongly disagrees, they're actually under, I think they both were about under 10 or 8% of the people that had actually responded. So the proof's really, I guess, in the pudding in terms of making sure that we're asking for that feedback. And again, there's always going to be people who don't like change or want to do things the way they want to do. But I think for us as an organisation, and we just had an implementation review with some of your team, Shannan, yesterday around assessing the feedback from our volunteers, assessing the feedback from our volunteer coordinators, and we're really embarking on a process of making positive change and taking that feedback on board, because we do want to make sure that the most amount of people we can have a great experience. But it's also throughout this transition, I guess, putting things in place to support those volunteers who still may find it a little bit tricky based on technological literacy, and we'll be able to push more forward with more support. We're going through a digital transformation ourselves in terms of a new website across Golf Australia and the PGA. So we're going to have a dedicated volunteer page where we'll be able to provide more support around our programs and applying for different volunteering roles across golf. But at the end of the day, it's making sure that we still communicate our value proposition as to why this is really important to our volunteers and our volunteer coordinators, because often people will say, well, it's difficult for me. We acknowledge it's difficult for you, but it's communicating to them how it's changing the way that we receive information about our volunteers, which means that we can actually now reward and recognise them appropriately. We can source more volunteers for different events because we already have the information in one place, for example, as well. For myself, I volunteered at 3 Women's Australian Opens when I was quite young. I was a teenager, and I actually don't know where that data is, because it's probably at a number of different golf clubs that hosted the events at the time. So if I do another 2 Australian Opens and hit the 5-year mark, we actually don't have the data at the moment. So Rosterfy allows us to hone in on those, serial volunteers and people who've done a lot of volunteering in this space to actually appropriately recognise them. And I think if they see that value and see how them engaging with this system will actually help us help them, but also about the future volunteers. We do acknowledge that we need to look at the current volunteers, and there's such an important part of what we do and what we do as a sport. But it's about our future pipeline of talent as well, which is what we're looking at the moment with our workforce strategy for the industry. It's, we want to make sure that we're engaging better and connecting better with those currently working and volunteering in golf. But how do we actually create a pipeline of talent that will allow us to have our sport continue to grow?
Yep. And I think that standardization of process and consistency, you spoke about at the start, right, of these supporters and fans and players of golf, that you want your workforce to be showing up and presenting themselves really well, right? But then before a systemization and a standardization of process, it's very difficult for you to be able to say, well, that golf club is going to provide the volunteer with that standardized consistency of approach, let alone the next golf club or the next, where they might be applying and falling into a black hole, or maybe they're getting a really good experience, but ultimately you have no control or visibility of that. And they can be calling out for, Claudia, we're really struggling here, we're short on volunteers. But when you have no visibility of what's actually they're struggling with, or, what have you actually been engaging with all the applicants that have come back, or are you just trying to appease perhaps groups that have been there in the past? That's where it gets really tricky, isn't it? And you and the team have been so, really courageous in the approach of saying, and the data is so key in this process you're going on, right? Without it, you don't have much to stand on. But it's about saying, 80% of people are really on board with this journey. we're not going to hold ourselves back for the 20% that perhaps aren't or are in the process of transitioning as well. Because it can be so easy to listen to the noise, can't it? Of, oh, just too hard. How have you found that experience, and how do you guys navigate that perhaps internally? Less probably technology, but that's a big part of this. My question to you is, what challenges have you faced in listening to the noise but also sticking true to what you believe, and how do you guys handle
Yeah.
that?
That's a really great question, and it's definitely challenging. And I know even in my role, looking at workforce engagement from a holistic standpoint of paid and volunteer workforce, golf is an industry, and it still is, it's quite fragmented. So we've got, as I mentioned, 1,603 clubs, facilities, and places to play across the country, which, to be frank, have to date probably operated like 1,603 independent milk bars. So it's very different from other landscapes, but sport, I'm finding that a lot of my colleagues in this space are experiencing the same challenges. At the end of the day, it is hard. And I think for us, acknowledging that it's difficult is the first step. But if we can make 1% change every day, we're moving in the right direction. But for us, we need to make sure that we are listening to the noise, whether it's genuine noise or whether it's people just kicking up a fuss because they don't like the change. I think when it's genuine noise, acknowledging that we are going to look at it and take their feedback on board has been really important. With the maybe disingenuous noise or the noise around, well, I don't want to do it because it affects me. Again, it's about communicating the value proposition, but data's been really big in supporting, as you said, the satisfaction around this process. And us as an organisation, in terms of being the NSO for golf, we want to become the source of truth when it comes to data and evidence around how people are feeling about golf, what thoughts about golf are, what our volunteers think about golf. So always bringing back to the data and actually sharing it with people to go, well, look, it actually wasn't as bad as you thought. I think you can't lie about the numbers and the data and the feedback, but we needed to draw a line in the sand because we can't change the way that we interact with our volunteer workforce if we continue doing the same thing. And I'm sure it would be the same in other industries. I mean, a pandemic had to happen for certain things to go online, and probably for people of my parents' generation to take out a phone and use a QR code. And the best example is my mother. She'd never used a QR code before. You had to scan and check in everywhere. Now she's scanning QR codes everywhere. So I think sticking to our guns has been really, really important because we don't want to double back on the progress that we've made. And again, I think it just goes back to sharing the value proposition and around how changing now and having teething room will actually reap rewards and benefits down the track.
Yeah. Now, you touched on reward and recognising volunteers earlier. I know it's a bit of a transition and you've got so much on your plate already with what you're doing, but do you have any sort of preliminary thoughts around perhaps firstly, like why you would do it? Like what's the incentive? Like if I'm a volunteer, why are you doing it? Are you doing it to recruit more volunteers or is it to say thank you? And what could that program potentially look like in time, or is that a bit far away?
Yeah. So we're thinking about what we can do at this point in time. We haven't got to a point where we've actually built a whole structured recognition reward process. But I think it's really for us, the attraction piece is probably not the reason why, or the key reason why we'd want to go down the road of having a robust reward and recognition program. It's really just to say thank you. Like it's to come from, again, the NSO and also the Professional Golfers Association, they run the tour, and it's really about to thank those volunteers and show our appreciation for them. But I think what's great as well, volunteers also really like to celebrate what they've done. And it's such a talking point between volunteers. I've heard it at a number of events this season of, oh, this is my 5th Australian Open and this is my first time volunteering, or I've done X amount of walker scoring shifts this week. And the fact now that we've been able to activate on our dashboards, showing volunteers, this is how many events you've done, this is how many shifts you've done. We can use that to hopefully incorporate like a badge status and say, you've done 5 Australian Opens, and we've already started to talk around creating name badges or pin badges that people can wear to really be proud of the number of hours and the efforts that they've put in. And I just think it's a really good talking and connection point for volunteers who maybe are new as well. Oh, you've volunteered at 10 Australian Opens. Can you tell me about it? So I think it brings and connects volunteers as well as provides us with an opportunity to recognise and say thank you.
Yeah, I think you and I both know if you were to put these badges out, you would have people crawling over each other to be getting the different badge with
We see it from a sporting perspective in golf. So for any club golfers who are listening to the podcast, you might at your golf club, you've got monthly medals. If you're a competition golfer at a traditional golf club, the club champion will often be given a golf pin. If you win a pennant flag, you'll be given a pin. And I remember as a child playing, 7 or 8 years old at the first golf club, they'd have medal day and all these women and men would be wearing all these medals. And again, it's just something to talk about. You see it I support AFL and I'm one of those nuffies who's got bunch of different badges of players on my scarf, and I've got badges that I've had since I was 6-7 years old. So you see it across a lot of different landscapes, and it just provides that recognition. It's a memory, and it's also a talking point for those volunteers.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, you've been generous with your time, but I do see this as one of the most exciting volunteer programs, obviously in Australia for me, from I guess what I've seen in the very short amount of time, especially for yourself, you've been involved with, but really around the world. Like we now work with quite a few golf associations around the world in different countries. And honestly, no one's really doing what you guys are doing, or the trajectory isn't the same in terms of, and that's why I touched on that courageous part about the work you guys are doing. So I think you guys are in a really good place and pausing a lot to interview volunteers, sit with them, understand them, use data to help drive decisions. Like it's not like you're just saying it's my way or the highway. It's about iterative try, test, explore process you're going through. I think you guys are certainly on the right track, of course. And then for yourself, is there anything else you're excited about for that workforce engagement? We touched on it at the very beginning around referees potentially coming into this overall workforce and people in golf. So because it's such a fascinating term, workforce, where there's so many different people that can fit in this bucket, am I right in thinking you're now engaging referees under this sort of program as well? What's your thoughts there?
Yes. So we've got a number of volunteers across the country who support with refereeing and tournament support. And it was earlier this year, just before the amateur season started in Victoria, we decided to create an event that was all of the refereeing opportunities throughout the whole year. And it's going so well in Victoria. We've got people on waiting lists. And again, we've got a demographic of seasoned volunteers who are engaged and putting their hand up and embracing the change and asking for support when they need. And we're now going to roll this out across all of our other states and territories, which is really, really exciting. And I feel as though this is the next point where, for me, where I see things are going to be taken to another level is utilising Rosterfy to connect volunteers and also interns with our clubs, facilities and places to play. Because historically, our clubs and facilities have got volunteers who are supporting at the clubs and facilities, but they probably haven't been brave enough to go externally. So it would be fantastic if we could connect a local golf club with a football club or a Rotary club and connect those volunteers through Rosterfy, where the club can then go, well, I've got X amount of people to pick from. I'd like this person on this day and this person on that day. And it promotes golf as a sport that everyone can assist and work in and have a great experience in.
One thought from a prior podcast we did with Andy Newman, who's done a lot of major events around the world, the comment he made, which stayed with me, was around that even if he could pay, call it for Vic Open, a couple of hundred people to be out on the course, he would still prefer to have volunteers for the atmosphere, the passion, the drive they bring, the smiley faces. They love being there. What are your thoughts on that sort of comment and how that aligns with golf, with these people that genuinely love it and are willing to travel? What do you think about that comment?
I probably agree with it, to be honest. I mean, it's probably easy for me to say that too because I've been a volunteer in the not-for-profit space but also in golf. But at the end of the day, if you do bring, say, 100 or 200 casual staff, it might be more transactional. There's obviously money involved, but you've got volunteers who are willing to give up their time. We've got people who travel hundreds of kilometres to be involved at our events. They love being at events where they can be inside the ropes, close to the action. They feel like they're part of something bigger. But I think it's also the camaraderie and the collaboration and the friendships that they make as well, which has been big. So you see people and you see them chat, you see them having a laugh, and you especially see that, been to a few volunteer barbecues. I've been as myself as a volunteer and also in my role as head of workforce engagement, and it's like you've got this big team. So the more people that we can welcome into that team, it will really sell golf as a place that people want to be a part of and want to volunteer in.
Yeah. What did you say? The people that reflect the people that are coming into golf, the audience, right? I just found that so interesting about the community and needing to just not have all the same type of people representing you all the time. It's about you've got a mixed and diverse group of people that want to play golf and be involved. And so therefore, let's bring everyone involved in the volunteering side. I think it's a big thing I've grasped from this podcast and this time I've spent with you is how aligned your workforce and volunteer side is with the business. Like it's so connected, aren't they? It's not like you guys are overrunning. I think bluntly in other programs, it's like, hey, volunteer team, we need 150 volunteers, go and get them. Where you guys are about building a strategy for the long term and aligning with everything else in terms of golf's trying to recruit new players. You're trying to recruit new volunteers that match that demand and match that personality. I find that fascinating.
Yes. And and since I've been in this role, and it's been great, as I said, to be a part of literally transforming the way that people perceive golf and the way that we work with our clubs, facilities and places to play, and also with our workforce. This is work I don't think has been done before. It may have been attempted before previously, but I can even see as the change over 20, 25 plus years of me playing golf, how far things have come. And it's just really exciting to be part of that. And it was a colleague of mine who's a general manager of events for Golf Australia. She said to myself and one of the events officers who've been working really closely with for Vic Open, and she said, in 5, 10, 15 years, you guys can say that you were involved and you helped shape the way that we work with our volunteers and roster our volunteers. It's just massive, and it's a real honor to be part of that.
Yeah, I love it. All right, now to finish up, I've got 2 doozies for you. So the first one is from a prior podcast guest where they asked a question to the next guest, and this one's around AI. Now, this is a bit random, but do you see AI at all involving with volunteering and how sort of, I guess, technology enhancements can drive or change the way volunteering operates as we see it today, maybe in 10 years, 15 years' time? What are your thoughts on that?
If I think about AI and volunteering in golf, based on a lot of our volunteering opportunities need to be physically present, I'm not sure where I can see things being hand in hand. But definitely for maybe more administrative type duties and things where things need to be organized, or even just utilizing AI to source information about certain things. It's scary how much now, obviously, we can find out through AI. And, you see people even within the office asking ChatGPT questions and whatnot too. But I think for golf, because we are, in terms of volunteering opportunities, physical, and we're there and we need people to be there, but not saying that there can't be the opportunity for things to come together in terms of utilizing AI. We probably just haven't worked it out yet, to be honest. If we found an opportunity, we'd probably jump on it, because I think we should be using resources that make things more efficient. Obviously, I feel like you can never replace volunteers in a sense of, again, as I said, you're going to be physically there, but it might assist us in the way that we do certain things. And I feel like that's always going to be an opportunity rather than looking at it from a negative side of things. It's about embracing, again, another change in the landscape that we're in. So hopefully that answers the question. It is a bit of a doozy.
You've done well. Put you in the sand trap and you've got out. So good job. The next one then is potentially from yourself, a question to the next podcast guest. So another volunteer manager to join us. Do you have maybe it's an experience they've had with volunteers that really puts a smile on their face? Maybe it's a crazy moment that happened that makes them laugh. Is there a particular question you would like to ask the next guest on the podcast?
It's a good one. Maybe, again, it's probably going to depend on what guest you've got next, but what's the longest distance that an individual is aware of that a volunteer has travelled for a volunteering opportunity? I'm sure you probably have a few clients who may have travelled for big international events, but it'd be great to, like, the most obscure location or destination that someone's travelled from to be involved, because I think that really shows how committed people are.
Yep. Oh, that's good. I'll certainly ask that on the next one. I've even got a quick little story on that. At one Super Bowl I was at with the volunteer department, checking volunteers in. A lady turned up from France, had flown all the way from France to volunteer, and she turned up.
Wow.
I didn't have a shift for her.
I'm sure you guys would have found something.
Don't worry, the team worked it out, but it was a few awkward moments there going, oh my goodness, this person's travelled a long way. All fun and games. So look, Claudia, it's been amazing having you on. I'm authentic when I say I think it's one of the best volunteer programs, and the trajectory you're going on is amazing. I look forward to checking back in maybe 12 months time and seeing what you've achieved again in 12 months, because it's really special what you guys are building. So thanks again for your time, and thanks for joining us.
No, thank you, Shannon. And as I said, it's only the start. So it's really exciting about where we can take this.
Love it. All right. Thanks again. Talk to you soon. Thanks so much for listening to the Engage Volunteer podcast. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the world of volunteering. Until then, stay engaged and keep making a difference in your community.